The fire is too small. 2,000 men need more heat than this. Hannibal stands apart from the others. His breath forms white clouds in the cold air. The smoke does not rise toward the sky. It stays close to the ground like a living thing that refuses to leave. Snow began falling 3 days ago. No one expected snow in November. The Alps do not care about expectations. The elephants do not understand the cold. They stand together in a gray circle of misery. One of them leans against a dead mule. The mule has been frozen for hours. Its eyes are open. The snow has filled them. Hannibal watches the pass of the Cremona. The path ahead disappears into whiteness. Behind him lies a trail of broken wagons and dead horses. Behind that lies the Po Valley. Behind that lies Carthage. He has not seen Carthage in 15 years. The smell of Carthage is salt and orange blossoms. The Alps smell of nothing but cold stone. The men whisper among themselves. They think their general cannot hear them, but the mountain carries sound in strange ways. A cough from 50 feet away sounds like it is inside your ear. A whisper from 100 yards sounds like a breath on your neck. Some of the men say their general has lost his mind. Others say they should have stayed in Gaul. A few say the elephants will die before morning. Hannibal closes his eyes. The cold has cracked his lips. His hands are wrapped in wool and leather. His feet are numb inside his boots. He wears the same tunic he wore when they left Carthago Nova. That was 8 months ago. The wool smells of sweat and rain and horse. The smell of a long march. The smell of men who have not stopped walking. He opens his eyes and walks toward the whispers. The officers fall silent when they see him approaching. 30 men sit around a dying fire. Their faces are hollow from hunger and exhaustion. Their eyes are dark with fear. One of them has lost 2 fingers to frostbite. The stumps are wrapped in dirty cloth. Another cannot stand without help. His knees have swollen from the cold. The youngest among them is 19 years old. He cries at night when he thinks no one is listening. Hannibal kneels by the fire. He does not speak at first. He adds a branch to the flames. The wood is wet from the snow. It hisses and smokes before catching. A small flame appears, then another, then a third. The men watch his hands in silence. The year is 218 before the Common Era. Hannibal Barca is 29 years old. His father Hamilcar made him swear an oath when he was 9. The oath was simple and terrible. Hannibal held his father's hand and promised to be an enemy of Rome forever. That was 20 years ago. He has kept the promise every single day. The warmth of his father's hand still lives in his memory. The men expect a speech from their general. They expect orders shouted into the cold wind. They expect their leader to point at the pass and say something bold and inspiring. But their general says nothing for a long time. He adds another branch to the fire. The fire grows taller. The warmth reaches his face. He looks at each man, one by one, not quickly, slowly. His eyes are calm. There is no fear in those eyes. There is no anger either. There is something else. Something the men cannot name. An old officer finally speaks. His name is Mago. He fought with Hamilcar in Sicily 30 years ago. He has known Hannibal since the boy could walk. The old officer tells the general that the men are afraid. Hannibal nods but does not answer. The old officer says the men believe the pass is impossible to cross. Hannibal nods again. The old officer says the men want to turn back and return to Gaul. Hannibal looks at the fire. The flames move like dancers in the wind. They lean left, then right, then left again. He asks Mago what his father said about impossible things. The old officer does not answer. So Hannibal answers his own question. His father said, impossible is a word used by men who have stopped walking. The words hang in the cold air like smoke. Silence falls over the camp. The wind moves through the rocks. Somewhere in the darkness, an elephant makes a low sound. Not a trumpet of alarm. Something softer and sadder. Something that sounds almost human. The sound fades into the whiteness. Hannibal stands up from the fire. He is not a tall man. His body is lean and hard from years of marching and fighting. One eye was damaged in a fever years ago. It does not close completely. End quote. The white shows around the iris. In the firelight, he looks like a man who has already died once and returned from somewhere dark. He tells the men they will move at dawn. The elephants will go first. Their large feet will break the ice on the path. The cavalry will follow behind the elephants. The infantry will cover the rear of the column. He speaks in a quiet voice. The mountain does not let any word escape. A young officer raises a hand. His name is Cartholo. He is too young to have seen Carthage burn, too young to remember the Treaty of Lutatius. He asks what will happen if the path is blocked by fallen rocks. Hannibal says they will unblock the path. The young officer asks how. Hannibal smiles at the question. It is not a warm smile. It is the smile of a man who has already decided something terrible. He says they will unblock the path with fire and iron and the bodies of dead horses. The men go silent again. The fire cracks and pops. A piece of burning wood breaks in two. Sparks rise into the dark sky above the mountains. The sparks rise and rise until they disappear. They never reach the stars. Hannibal turns away from the fire. He walks to the edge of the camp. The camp sits on a ledge of rock. Below him, the mountain falls away into nothing but darkness and falling snow. Somewhere down there is Italy. Somewhere down there is Rome. Somewhere down there is the enemy his father taught him to hate before he could even read. The snow falls on his shoulders. It melts on his cheeks. It gathers in the lines of his weathered face. He whispers something to himself in the darkness. No one hears the words. The words are not for the men anyway. He speaks to his father who died years ago. He says he will not stop walking. He says he will never stop walking until Rome falls. The fire burns lower behind him. The men wrap themselves in their wool blankets. Some of them sleep. Some of them stare at the darkness. Some of them think of homes they will never see again. The elephants stand together like a wall of gray flesh and sorrow. The snow falls and falls and falls. The pass is narrow in the morning light, no wider than 2 oxen standing side by side. On the left side of the path, a wall of rock rises into the clouds. The rock is black and wet with melting ice. On the right side, the mountain falls away into a white void with no bottom. One wrong step, and a man disappears into that whiteness. No sound of falling, no scream of fear. Just silence where a man used to be a moment before. The elephants move slowly along the narrow path. Their large feet crack the ice beneath them. Their trunks hang low near the ground. One of the elephants stops moving completely. It refuses to take another step. The mahout speaks softly to the animal. He sings a song from North Africa, a song about the warm sea near Carthage, a song about home and the salt wind. The elephant does not move at first. Then it moves one step, then another. Hannibal arrives on horseback to see the stopped column. His horse is small and gray. Its breath comes in short white puffs like small clouds. He dismounts from the horse. He walks to the stopped elephant. He places his hand on the animal's trunk. The trunk is rough and warm. The elephant breathes. Warm air moves across Hannibal's cold fingers. He speaks one word to the elephant. The word is not a command shouted in anger. The word is quiet and calm. The elephant takes one step, then another, then another. The men watch their general with the elephant. They do not understand what just happened. They do not need to understand. They only need to see that the elephants move when their general speaks. That is enough for tired men in cold mountains. The column begins moving again. 2,000 soldiers walk in single file. 37 elephants follow the soldiers. Hundreds of horses walk behind the elephants. Thousands of mules carry the supplies. The mules carry grain from the farms of Gaul. They carry wine in clay amphorae sealed with wax. They carry salt for preserving meat. They carry iron for making weapons. These are the things an army needs to cross a mountain and destroy an empire. At midday, the path disappears completely. The column stops moving, not blocked by snow that can be cleared, not buried by ice that can be broken. A rock slide has erased the trail from the mountain. The mountain has shrugged its shoulders like a sleeping giant turning in bed. 100 tons of stones sit where the path used to be. The stones are sharp and dark. Some are the size of horses. Some are the size of houses. One stone is the size of a temple. The officers gather around their general. Their faces are gray with cold and fear. The young officer Cartholo says they must turn back to Gaul. The old officer Mago says they will lose half the army if they try to cross the rocks. Another officer says the elephants cannot climb over stones that large. The men speak in low voices. Their breath makes white clouds that mix together. Hannibal looks at the rocks for a long time. He touches one of the large stones with his bare hand. The stone is cold beyond cold. It is older than Carthage, older than Rome, older than the gods his mother taught him to fear when he was a child in the temple of Baal. The stone has been sitting on this mountain for 10,000 years. It will sit here for 10,000 more after Hannibal is dust. He turns to Mago and asks how much wine remains in the supply train. The old officer says, "There is enough wine for 2 weeks of marching." Hannibal tells him to bring all of it to the rocks. Mago hesitates for a moment. The wine is precious. The wine is warmth. The wine is the only thing keeping the men from despair. But Mago gives the order. 50 clay amphorae are brought to the rocks. Each amphora holds 20 liters of Spanish wine, the good wine from the vineyards near Carthago Nova, the wine they had saved for crossing the mountains, the wine they had dreamed of drinking when they reached the plains of Italy. Hannibal orders the soldiers to pour the wine onto the rocks and into the snow. The officers watch in disbelief. Good wine pouring onto frozen stone, the wine that could have warmed 100 men on a cold night, the wine that could have bought the loyalty of a Gallic tribe. The wine that represents the labor of 100 farmers and the patience of 10 years. The wine runs between the rocks. It pools in the cracks where ice has formed. It soaks into the snow and turns it pink. Hannibal gives another order. Fire. The soldiers light torches from the campfires. They throw the burning torches onto the wine-soaked rocks. The wine catches fire with a low whoosh. Blue flames rise from the snow and stone. The heat of the fire reaches the faces of the watching men. The flames crack and dance. The fire burns for 1 hour, then 2 hours, then 3 hours. The heat expands the stone. The cold cracks it. This is the way of stone in the mountains. Fire and ice working together to break what cannot be broken by iron alone. When the fire finally dies, the rocks are broken into smaller pieces. The men work through the night with hammers and iron bars. They break the cracked stone into smaller pieces. They throw the broken stone down the side of the mountain. The sound of falling rocks echoes through the pass for hours. Each rock hits another rock, and then another. The sound fades slowly into the whiteness below. Hannibal watches the men work through the night. He does not sleep. He does not eat the hard bread that one of the soldiers offers him. He stands at the edge of the pass and watches the men break the mountain with fire and iron. Sometimes a soldier looks up from his work and sees the general watching. Hannibal nods at the soldier. That is all. A single nod of the head. Then the soldier works harder than before. History will remember this night. The historian Polybius will write about it 200 years later from the library in Greece. The Roman writer Livy will call the crossing a miracle of will and strategy. But neither of those riders were standing on the pass that night. Neither of them saw the faces of the soldiers covered in sweat and snow. Neither of them heard the sound of Spanish wine burning on frozen alpine stone. Neither of them smelled the smoke and the wine and the fear of 2,000 men. What the historians will not write is this: a young soldier died on that night. His name was Bostar. He was 22 years old. He came from Utica, a city north of Carthage, near the sea. He had joined the army because his father was poor and his mother was sick with a fever that would not break. He wanted to send money home to his family. He never sent a single coin. The cold took him while he worked. He sat down against a rock to rest for a moment. He never stood up again. Hannibal found the young soldier in the morning. The young man's face was peaceful in death. His hands were folded in his lap, as if he had simply fallen asleep. The snow had covered his feet and his legs. He looked like a statue carved from white stone. Hannibal covered the young soldier's body with a wool blanket. He stood in silence for a long moment. The wind moved through the pass. The general said no words over the body. Words would not bring Bostar back to his mother in Utica. Then Hannibal walked to the front of the column. He gave one order to the waiting army: move. The army moved forward through the broken rocks and past the body of Bostar. The men walked in silence. No one sang that morning. The only sounds were the crunch of boots on broken stone and the low breathing of elephants. Hannibal Barca was born in the year 247 before the Common Era. The same year, his father Hamilcar took command of Carthaginian forces on the island of Sicily. The same year, Rome began building a new fleet of warships in the harbor of Ostia. The same year, the First Punic War entered its 17th year of blood and fire. He never knew a world without war. War was the air he breathed as a child. His mother was not a noblewoman of Carthage. History does not remember her name at all. She was probably from a merchant family in the harbor district. She probably died when Hannibal was still young. Most Carthaginian mothers died young in those years. Childbirth was a river of blood and silence. The infant mortality was high, and the grief was constant. Hannibal never spoke of his mother to anyone. The silence around her name is the loudest evidence of his love. Hannibal grew up in the barracks with the soldiers of his father's army, and he learned to ride a horse before he could write his name in Punic script. He learned to throw a spear before he learned to read the stories of the gods. He learned to hate Rome before he learned to love anything else in the world. The hatred was like a second heart beating inside his chest. His father took him to Spain when he was 9 years old. Hamilcar was building a new Carthaginian empire there on the southern coast. New Carthage rose from the shore. The city had white walls and red roofs and streets laid out in straight lines. The Romans watched from across the narrow sea. They did not like what they saw. They never liked seeing Carthaginian power grow in any direction. At 9 years old, Hannibal stood before an altar in a temple of Baal. His father placed a heavy hand on the boy's head. The smoke from a burning sacrifice rose between father and son. The smell of burning flesh filled the temple. Hamilcar asked his son to swear an oath in the presence of the gods. The oath had 3 parts. First, Hannibal swore he would never be a friend to Rome. Second, he swore he would never make peace with Rome. Third, he swore he would carry hatred for Rome in his heart until the day he died. Hannibal swore the oath. He was 9 years old, a child with a child's voice, speaking words he did not fully understand. But the gods heard the words. The Father heard the words. The boy heard his own voice saying terrible things in the smoke-filled temple. Some historians say the oath is a myth invented to make Hannibal seem more dramatic and driven. But those historians never met a Carthaginian father. They never saw how a dead man's words can live inside his son for 20 years and more. When Hamilcar died in battle, Hannibal was 18 years old. He did not cry at his father's funeral. He did not speak to anyone for 3 days after the body was burned. He sat by the sea and watched the waves break on the shore near Carthage. His soldiers thought their young general had lost his mind from grief, but he had not lost his mind at all. He was making a decision that would change the world. The decision was simple in its shape and terrible in its consequences. He would finish what his father started. He would cross the mountains between Gaul and Italy. He would bring the war to Roman soil. He would burn Rome to the ground, stone by stone. He would salt the earth where the Forum stood. He would make the name of Carthage feared for 1,000 years. Now, 10 years after his father's death, Hannibal is crossing the high passes of the Alps. The snow is deep and cold. The men are dying from frost and hunger. The elephants are suffering from the unfamiliar cold. And somewhere behind him, his father's ghost walks in his frozen footsteps. The general can almost hear his father's voice in the wind. The voice says nothing. The voice has been silent for 10 years, but the silence speaks louder than any words. The 3rd day on the pass is the hardest day of all. The path narrows to a ledge no wider than a man's shoulders. The ledge is covered with black ice that shines like glass in the pale light. The elephants slide on the ice. Their legs move in different directions. One elephant loses its footing completely. It falls sideways off the ledge. The animal screams as it falls. The sound echoes off the mountains on both sides of the pass. The sound bounces back and forth. It is a terrible sound to hear. The sound of a living creature falling into nothing. The elephant does not die immediately from the fall. It falls 200 feet down the side of the mountain. It lands on a lower ledge covered with snow. Its legs are broken in 3 places. Its trunk moves weakly in the air. The mahout tries to climb down the rock wall to reach the dying animal. He cannot reach it. The rock is too steep and too cold for climbing. The mahout calls out to the elephant in their shared language. The elephant makes a sound in response. Hannibal watches from above. He does not look away from the dying animal. He owes the elephant that much respect. The elephant carried supplies for 200 miles across 2 countries. The elephant never complained about the cold or the hunger or the steep paths. The elephant did its duty without question. Hannibal stands at the edge of the ledge and watches the animal die. It takes 1 hour for the elephant to die. The sounds grow weaker and weaker. Then there is silence. When the elephant is finally dead, Hannibal turns to his waiting army. He tells the men they will keep moving forward. There is no other direction that leads to victory. A soldier named Gisgo steps forward from the column. Gisgo is from the city of Carthage itself. He has a wife and 3 children waiting for him at home. He has not seen their faces in 2 years of marching and fighting. The soldier asks his general a question that many men want to ask. He asks, what is waiting at the bottom of this cold mountain? He asks, what is worth dying for in Italy? Hannibal looks at the soldier named Gisco. The wind moves between them. Snow gathers on both of their shoulders. The general says one word in answer to the question, Rome. The soldier repeats the word Rome with confusion in his voice. None of the soldiers truly understand what Rome means. They have never seen the city with their own eyes. They only know what their general has told them about Rome, that Rome is an enemy of Carthage, that Rome must be destroyed, that Rome is the reason their fathers died in the First Punic War and their mothers wept in the streets. Hannibal sees the confusion on Gisco's face. He sees the same confusion on the faces of all the men in the column. They are not noblemen fighting for glory. They are mercenaries from Numidia and Gaul. They are farmers from the fields outside Carthage. They are exiles from cities destroyed by Rome. They are men who joined the army because there was nothing else for them at home. They do not hate Rome with a personal hatred. They do not know Rome at all. So Hannibal tells them something true, not a speech filled with grand words, not an order shouted into the wind, just a memory from his childhood that still burns like a coal in his chest. He tells them about a field outside Carthage where his father took him as a boy. The field was full of wooden markers, stakes driven into the earth in straight rows. Each stake had a name carved into the wood. The names of Carthaginian soldiers who died fighting Rome in the First Punic War. 10,000 stakes in that field, maybe more than 10,000. Hamilcar walked his son through the rows of stakes. End quote. He read the names aloud in a quiet voice. He knew some of the names, friends from his youth, cousins from his mother's family, his own brother who died on a Roman sword. Hannibal looks at Gisgo and tells him the rest of the memory. When the walk through the field of stakes was finished, Hamilcar turned to his 9-year-old son and said something that never left the boy's mind. The father said, "This is what Rome has done to Carthage." The father said, "This is what Rome will always do to Carthage unless someone stops them." The father said, "Someone must be strong enough to cross the mountains and burn the enemy's home." The father looked at his son when he said these words. Hannibal tells the soldier Gisgo that this is what waits at the bottom of the mountain. Not Rome, the city of stone and marble. Not glory that fades like smoke. Not gold that loses its shine. An end to the fields of wooden stakes. An end to the rows of names carved into sad wood. An end to the widows and orphans of Carthage. Gisco nods at his general. He does not understand everything his general said. The memory is not his memory. The hatred is not his hatred. But he understands enough. He understands that his general is not a madman leading men to death for no reason. He understands that something real is waiting in Italy. He turns and walks back to his place in the column. The army moves forward again. The army has been walking through the mountains for 9 days. They have crossed 2 high passes covered in snow. They have lost 500 men to the cold and the falls and the rock slides. They have lost 7 elephants on the narrow ledges. They have lost 3,000 mules carrying food and wine and iron. The trail behind the column is marked by frozen bodies and broken equipment. The bodies lie where they fell. There is no time for burial in the mountains. But the army is close to the end of the mountains. Hannibal can smell the difference in the air. Not the smell of Italy reaching his nose, not yet, but the smell of the end of the mountains. The air is less thin in his lungs. The cold is less sharp on his face. The snow is deeper but softer under the feet of the elephants. The wind has stopped its constant howling through the rocks. Something has changed in the mountains. Something has given way. On the 9th night of the crossing, Hannibal calls a meeting of the whole army, not just the officers this time. Every soldier who can still walk and carry a weapon gathers around 1,000 small fires. The fires are smaller than they were in Gaul. The mountains have few trees for burning, but the men have learned to make heat from anything they can find. Wood from broken wagons, dried dung from the mules. Os, the leather straps of dead horses, the smell of burning leather fills the camp. Hannibal stands on a large rock near the center of the camp. The rock is white with fresh snow. His shadow is long in the flickering light of the fires. The men gather in a wide circle around their general. Their faces are thin and bearded. Their eyes are tired, but something else is waking up in them. Something that looks like hope. Their general tells them they will reach the bottom of the mountains tomorrow. The men cheer at these words. The sound of the cheer echoes off the rocks. The mountains throw the sound back at the army from 12 directions. The cheer becomes a chorus of cheers that lasts for a full minute. Some of the men weep with joy. Some of the men embrace the soldiers standing next to them. 9 days of cold and death and constant fear. 9 days of watching friends fall into the white nothing. 9 days of asking why they ever left Gaul. And now tomorrow will bring Italy. Hannibal raises his hand for silence. The men fall quiet slowly. The echoes fade one by one. He tells the army what they will find in Italy. Rivers wider than any sea in Africa. Cities taller than any mountain in Carthage. Armies larger than the stars visible in the night sky. The Romans have been waiting for the Carthaginian army to arrive. They have built walls of stone along the riverbanks. They have gathered weapons in every town and village. They think the Carthaginians will fail in the mountains. They think the cold and the snow and the rocks will destroy Hannibal's army before it reaches Italian soil. The general pauses for a moment. The fires crackle in the silence. He tells the men, the Romans are wrong. The Romans do not know the Carthaginian army. The Romans do not know the men who crossed the Alps in winter. The Romans will learn the truth tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. The Romans will learn the truth at the point of a Carthaginian sword. The men roar with approval. The sound rises from the camp and rises into the dark sky. Somewhere high above the pass, a bird flies away from the noise. The first bird they have seen in 9 days of crossing. The bird disappears into the whiteness. But first, the general tells his army, the men must rest. They must eat the remaining food. They must sleep while they can. Tomorrow, they will walk the last path down the mountain. After that, there will be no more mountains, no more snow under their boots, no more ice on the narrow ledges, just flat ground and Roman blood, and the beginning of the end of Rome. The men return to their fires after the speech. They share their food with each other. They tell stories of Carthage in quiet voices, stories of the sea near the harbor, stories of the warm wind that comes from the south in spring, stories of the smell of orange blossoms in the gardens of their mothers. The stories are soft and gentle. They are not stories of war or death or glory. They are stories of home. A soldier takes out a wooden flute from his pack. He begins to play a slow melody. The music is soft and sad. It moves through the camp like water flowing between stones. The men close their eyes and listen. Some of them dream of home while the music plays. The flute sounds like a voice from another world, a world without war, a world without Rome, a world without snow. Hannibal does not sleep on the 9th night. He walks among the fires of his army. He stops at each group of soldiers and speaks to them, not as a general giving orders to his men, as a man speaking to other men who have shared the same cold and the same fear and the same hope. He asks each soldier for his name. He asks each soldier for his home city. He asks each soldier about his family waiting across the sea. A soldier from Hadrumetum tells the general about his mother and his younger sister. The general promises the soldier that he will see them again when the war is over. The soldier's eyes fill with tears at the promise. He does not speak in response. He cannot speak without weeping. The general moves to the next fire. A soldier from Numidia tells the general about his wife, who is pregnant with their first child. The general smiles and says the child will be born into a world without Roman fear. The soldier from Numidia laughs at the words. The laugh is loud and honest. It makes other men laugh nearby. Hannibal speaks to 100 soldiers on that 9th night. He learns their names and their homes and their families and their secret fears. Some of these men will die in the battles of Italy. He knows this truth in his heart. But tonight, they are still alive. Tonight, they are warm enough to sleep. Tonight, they have hope, like a small flame in their chests. At the last fire of the night, an old man sits alone. His name is Hasdrubal. He is 60 years old. He fought in the First Punic War against Rome. He was at the Battle of the Aegates Islands when Carthage lost everything to the Roman fleet. He watched the Roman ships burn Carthaginian vessels one by one. He swam to the shore through water thick with smoke and burning oil and the bodies of his friends. The old man has been waiting 20 years for revenge against the enemy who took everything from him. Hannibal sits down next to the old soldier. They do not speak for a long time. They watch the fire burn lower. The flames move in the wind. The snow falls gently around them. The world is quiet and dark and cold. But the old man and the general sit together in silence. After a long time, the old soldier speaks in a voice like dry leaves. He tells the general that Hamilcar would be proud of his son. Hannibal says nothing in response. The old soldier says it again. He says Hamilcar would be very proud of what his son has done. The words hang in the cold air between them. Hannibal stands up from the fire. He walks to the edge of the camp where the mountain falls away into darkness. He looks down toward Italy, hidden somewhere below the clouds and the snow. Somewhere down there is the beginning of the end. Somewhere down there is the war his father wanted him to fight. Somewhere down there is the answer to the oath he swore when he was 9 years old. He whispers something into the darkness. The wind takes the words away before they can travel far. The words are for his father. They have always been for his father. Every step of every mile has been for his father. The whisper fades into the falling snow. The morning of the 10th day is clear and bright. The sky is blue in a way the mountains have not shown before. For the first time in 9 days, the sun touches the army with warmth. The snow on the ground sparkles like diamonds scattered on white cloth. The ice on the rocks begins to melt in the unexpected warmth. Water drips from every surface. The sound of dripping water is gentle, like rain falling on dry ground, like 1,000 small bells ringing in the same moment. Hannibal stands at the front of the column. Behind him, 1,500 men remain alive and walking. The rest of the army is gone, dead from cold, lost in the snow, left behind in the passes. but 1,500 soldiers are still standing. 1,500 soldiers are still carrying their weapons. 1,500 soldiers are enough for what comes next. 1,500 soldiers are all Hannibal needs to begin the war against Rome. He raises his arm as a signal. The column begins moving down the final slope of the mountain. The path is wide now on the lower slopes. The mountain has opened its arms to the army. The snow is soft from the morning sun. The elephants walk without slipping on the wet rocks. The horses trot with energy they have not shown in days. The men sing as they march, a marching song from North Africa with words older than Carthage itself, older than Rome, older than the Phoenician ships that first carried settlers to the African coast. The words speak of walking to the sea. The sea will carry the walker home. The sea remembers every name whispered into the waves. At midday, Hannibal stops at the edge of a cliff. He looks down at the land below the mountain. The mountain ends at this point. Below him, a green valley spreads out like a carpet woven by the gods. Rivers run through the valley like silver threads connecting villages. Smoke rises from the chimneys of farms and small towns. Fields of wheat wave in the warm wind that comes from the south. The snow does not fall in that valley. The sun shines on that valley. Italy. Hannibal has dreamed of this moment for 20 years, since he was 9 years old standing in the temple of Baal, since he swore the oath of eternal hatred, since his father died and left him alone with the promise. Italy spreads out below him like a gift waiting to be taken. The enemy's home. The heart of the beast that has been beating against Carthage for 3 generations. He turns to face his men. The 1,500 soldiers stand in silence behind their general. They are waiting for words. They are waiting for orders. They are waiting for something to mark this moment in their memories. The old officer Mago steps forward from the column. His face is weathered and thin from the crossing, but his eyes are bright with emotion. He tells the general that the army has crossed the impossible. Hannibal nods at the old officer. Mago then asks what the army will do now that Italy is below them. Hannibal looks back at the green valley. The sun is warm on his face for the first time in 10 days. He closes his eyes and feels the warmth on his eyelids. He breathes the air of Italy. The air smells of grass and earth and growing things. It smells nothing like the cold stone of the mountains. Then he opens his eyes and answers the old officer's question. He says 4 words: "We walk to Rome." No great speech follows the 4 words. No dramatic declaration shouted from the cliff. No raising of swords to the sky. Just 4 words spoken in a quiet voice. We walk to Rome. The words are simple. The men understand the words, They cheer with voices made raw from the cold and the singing. The sound of the cheer rolls down the mountain like thunder. It reaches the valley below. The farmers in their fields look up toward the mountains. They see dark shapes moving against the white snow. They do not know what they are seeing yet, but they will know soon enough. The army begins the final descent from the mountain. Slowly at first, the path is still steep on the upper slopes, but the men are patient now. They have learned patience from the mountains. They have learned that rushing leads to falling. They have learned that falling leads to death. They take each step with care. One foot, then the other foot, then the next step. An hour passes. 2 hours pass. 3 hours pass. And then something changes. The boots of the first soldiers touch the soil of Italy. Not snow, not ice, not frozen rock. Soil, brown earth, with grass growing in it. The kind of earth that can be planted with seeds. The kind of earth that grows wheat and grapes and olive trees. The kind of earth that men fight and die to own. Some of the soldiers fall to their knees when they feel soil under their boots. They kiss the ground with their cracked lips. They weep without shame. 9 days of crossing the impossible mountains. 9 days of cold and death, and the constant question of why. Now they know why they crossed. They crossed so they could stand on Italian soil with weapons in their hands. Hannibal stands apart from his kneeling men. He looks back at the mountains they have crossed. The peaks are white against the blue sky of late afternoon. The mountains look peaceful from this distance. They do not look like killers of men and elephants. They do not look like the frozen graves of 500 soldiers. They look like paintings on the wall of a rich man's house. He thinks of the men who did not make the crossing, the 500 soldiers who froze on the passes, the 7 elephants who fell from the narrow ledges. The young soldier from Utica who sat down against a rock and never stood up again. The mahout who called out to his dying elephant in their shared language. The old soldier Hasdrubal, who waited 20 years for revenge and died the day before they reached the bottom. He thinks of all of them as the sun warms his face. He whispers 2 words into the warm Italian air. Good night. Then he turns away from the mountains. He faces the green valley of Italy. He faces the rivers and the farms and the roads that lead to Rome. He faces everything his father dreamed about in the temple of Baal. He faces everything he promised on the night of the oath. He takes 1 step onto Italian soil, then another step, then another step. The army follows behind their general. 1,500 soldiers who have walked through the impossible and survived. They do not know what comes next. The battles have not been fought yet. The victories have not been won yet. The gates of Rome have not been seen yet. The oath has not been fulfilled yet. But that is another story for another night. Tonight, The story ends here, on a green valley floor in the north of Italy, in the warm sun of late afternoon, with 1,500 men who crossed the Alps in winter and lived to tell the story. They do not know what the future holds for them. They do not know which of them will see Carthage again. But tonight they are alive. Tonight they are warm. Tonight they have done something no army has ever done before. Tonight is enough. Good night.